Hey, welcome to another video. I want to talk today about the alcohol culture. I'm all for personal responsibility. Every drop of alcohol that ever went into my body, it got there because I put it into my mouth. And I'm quite happy to take that responsibility, especially now that I don't drink anymore, right? Um, but you have to take into account the culture that we live in. Most people start drinking when they're young, when they don't have any real experience of life. And a huge factor in why young people are taking up alcohol is because they don't want to be left out, right? And it's tough when you're young to, if you're in with the crowd and the crowd are all drinking and you don't drink. So it's not just about being socially acceptable to drink. It's not just about that. You're actually the weirdo if on the other end of that scale you stop drinking or if you don't drink, especially when you're young. People think that there's something wrong with you if you don't drink, like you've got some kind of a condition. So this is not only a problem because young people are going to get dragged into this drug and they wouldn't even think about doing it if that wasn't the case, but it makes it much more difficult to step away from the habit because you're not only contending with dealing with the habit and getting away from the habit, you're also contending with the social acceptance part of this, which is a huge part of human motivation. And this is not just about the kids, like I said. We're talking about grown adults here. I was 46 when I stopped drinking alcohol, and I remember going into the bar the first day after I'd stopped, or the first time I'd gone into a bar after I'd stopped to watch a football match, and being really, really nervous about the whole thing. And not because I was doubting my decision, but because I was afraid of what my mates would say, that social acceptance part of it. So another part of it was a few months after I'd stopped. I remember being at an Indian restaurant and telling a woman who was at our table, she was a friend of a friend, we were all having a meal. And I told her that I didn't drink when it all came around, and they asked me what did I want. She says, "Oh, you're driving?" I went, "No, I don't drink." And she gave me this look and she went, "Oh, poor you, poor you." And, it was something along those lines. I can't remember exactly what she said. It doesn't matter, really, what she said. But I remember thinking, look at you. You're almost squeezing the wine bottle. She poured the end of it off and she was shaking the bottle just to get the last drops out of it. And it was this cheap, horrible wine that they give you for free at the table as part of your meal. And then she was saying, "Poor me," right? So the irony of it was, looking back to myself and to what I was thinking at that time, it was early for me. Like I said, it was only a couple of months after I'd stopped drinking. And part of me was thinking the same thing. Poor me. That inner conflict. I've been doing this for over 30 years. And the habit part, it just doesn't give in that easy. The habit was still strong in me, Luke. Do you know? So, when you look at this in the cold, hard light of day, right? In the cold, hard light of morning, when someone thinks, when they're talking about it being a condition because you've stopped drinking alcohol, the first word that probably occurs to these people is alcoholic. It's another one of those things that we've been conditioned to believe. It never occurs to these people that maybe you're the one that's doing the right thing. They don't see it. They don't see that alcohol is the enemy here. Not really. So, what are they hiding from? Now, whether they know it or not, there's so many different conditions that happen because you were drinking alcohol. Alcoholic fatty liver, hepatitis, cirrhosis, pancreatitis, high blood pressure, cardiomyopathy, stroke, mouth cancer, throat cancer, esophageal cancer, all kinds of cancers, colon cancer, gastritis, ulcers, wet brain syndrome, dementia, depression, anxiety disorders, immune system problems. So all of these conditions are caused because you've been drinking alcohol. And these people believe that alcoholics are not born, that they're made. Just let that sink into to your mind for a minute that alcoholics are not born, but they're made. And it's an excuse for them to believe that they don't have an alcohol problem. It's the alcoholic that has an alcohol problem. And they believe that for some people, all it takes is for them to have one or two drinks and they're hooked for life. It's an idea from people who I don't think most people want to think too much about it. It's the alcoholics that have the problem. And if you can solve the alcoholic problem, like there's a lot of companies that are trying to do, then, regardless of what way that is, brain surgery, drugs, preferably for drug companies, it's to give you a drug and then you take a drug and you keep taking the drug for the rest of your life. And once they solve the alcoholic problem, then all problems to do with alcohol are solved. So-called alcoholics are not made without alcohol. If there's no such thing as alcohol, then there's no alcoholic, right? So I just think it's all part of the same bullshit. It's part of the delusion. It's part of that trap that if you think what separates normal drinkers from problem drinkers is alcoholic versus non-alcoholic, then I think you're in trouble. You're in big trouble as a drinker. Alcohol is everywhere. Alcohol drinkers are everywhere. Alcohol drinking has seeped its way into every part of our society. Alcohol problems are everywhere. Now, everyone knows somebody who's been ruined by putting alcohol into their mouths or close to it. But those are the obvious ones. What about everyone else? What about all the drinkers who are ruining their lives just enough to make a difference to them, to slow them down, to make sure that they don't progress in their own lives, but not enough for them to really stand out? Not enough for them to put a label of alcoholic on. Nobody cares about that kind of stuff. The separation of the so-called alcoholics from the normal drinkers, just that idea alone was part of the problem for me, this is what kept me drinking for over 30 years. I go back to that personal responsibility, right? Again, I'm responsible for everything that goes into my mouth, right? Everything that I think, I'm responsible for that. But the culture supplies these helpful narratives, if you like, that create useful idiots. It's the narratives that are spewed out on TV about alcohol that keeps a lot of people addicted because they're chasing after this delusion. It's the same thing when you have the big adverts for pharma. We don't have that in our country. We don't have that here. I think the only two countries in the world that allow big pharma adverts are the United States and New Zealand. But big alcohol is everywhere, right? So on the one hand, we're fed this good narrative from big alcohol, and on the other hand, we're ignoring all the massive downsides, the massive cliff drop at the end of all this, where we're ignoring the crucial factors. Like alcohol is a neurotoxin. Alcohol kills 3 to 3.5 million people every year. Over 50% of all violent crimes are committed by a person who's been drinking this poison. Alcohol has been put, once it's in there in the human body, it causes all of those conditions that I was speaking about earlier on, all those brain conditions, the cirrhoses, the cancers. I think about the daily devastation that alcohol brings to people's lives all over the world, and not just to the people who are drinking this stuff, but to their families and their friends. Then it comes down to each drinker never asking themselves, what's actually happening inside my brain when I'm drunk? Or if they ask, they ignore the things that they don't want to hear, right? So ask yourself what's going on in your brain and in your body when you're drunk. What's happening to your brain and your body during a hangover? I remember saying in one part of my earlier videos that a part of the hangover was alcohol withdrawal, and another part was the effects of alcohol poisoning. And I got a ton of abuse for it. Alcohol poisoning? No, that's a different thing. It's another pet thing. It's like people get taken into hospital for that kind of stuff. And it's another lie that people tell themselves. They hang on to this medical definition of acute alcohol poisoning, you know, when someone's drank so much that their life is in danger. And the problem with this is that poisoning is not just a state. You know, if you get yourself into a state where you've drank so much that you're in hospital, you need to go into hospital to get your stomach pumped, because otherwise your bodily organs are going to start shutting down. That's the state that you're in. But there's also the process of alcohol poisoning. And the process of any poisoning begins that the moment that a toxin enters your body. And in this case, we're talking about the toxin of alcohol. That's what happens to me. But it's a toxin nonetheless, and the poisoning happens as soon as the alcohol enters your body, nonetheless. Right? Your body's defense mechanisms, they jump into action immediately, right? They recognize the presence of alcohol, they recognize the presence of the toxin, right? And they start to do everything that they can to eliminate that toxin from your body. And this is what I'm saying, ignoring the facts that are put in front of your face. I did the same, so I know this is happening. You know, you drink a poison, you get poisoned. Part of the illness you're feeling after drinking a poison is part of the illness of drinking a poison called alcohol is called alcohol poisoning. Part of the illness you're feeling is also alcohol withdrawal. And we just prefer to hide away from those truths. We prefer to hide behind a lie. And instead of calling it what it is, we make up harmless sounding names for these things, you know, getting drunk, hangover, you know. It's not poisoning. That would mean that we're culpable of putting a poison into our bodies. It's not withdrawal. That would mean that we're culpable in putting a drug into our bodies. You know, it's a hangover. You know, another aspect to this is where this is the only drug where when you don't take the drug, you're damned by the culture. Why? Because I think it scares them, you know, because you're a drinker and you hear about someone who's stopping drinking alcohol. It opens a window a little bit and you start to examine your own drinking a little bit, right? It makes you think about your own drinking. It drags your drinking out into the cold, hard light of the morning. It shines a spotlight onto what you're doing yourself, even inside your brain. Even if you're only doing it for a split second, it still does that, and it still makes you think, and people don't want to think. That goes against the whole ethos of drink your drink and shut the hell up, right? So anyway, that's it for today. I know a bit of a ramble today, but if you want some help to stop drinking, our free video course is still available. It's called The Beginner's Guide to Getting and Staying Sober. The link's in the description below. Take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you in the next video. Onward and upward day. Bye now.